Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be featuring the Mackensen, the Tier 6 German battle cruiser or battleship. Now I'm going to do a full commentary on the Tier 10, but as I haven't played it that much yet, I'm starting off with the Tier 6 since I have had plenty of time to play it. And this is of course the optimal situation to play this ship. Tier 6, so you're not being up-tiered, no submarines, no CVs, and ranked, where in small scale secondary ships are exponentially more powerful. And as you can see, you have access to Hydro on the Tier 6, and this Hydro is really powerful because it's 5.5 km range. In comparison, even cruisers at this tier, Soviet or American cruisers, they only get a 4 km Hydro. So having 5.5 km Hydro, the same Hydro that the Nuremberg has on your battleship, is very, very powerful, and it really catches a lot of ships off guard. The guns are, well, I'm going to be comparing it a fair bit with the Bayern. The guns are basically Prince Eitel Friedrich guns. The guns are, well, in terms of performance, they're pretty garbage in terms of penetration values. They actually have less penetration than the Bayern, and the Bayern with its 380s actually doesn't have particularly good penetration. For those who aren't aware, ships like Fuso, New Mexico, Ismail, all of them have significantly better penetration than the Bayern. We're talking like something like 20% better penetration, and this thing actually has even less penetration than the Bayern, and it's 350mm guns, which means you don't have the overmatch of the 380s. In fact, 350mm guns only overmatch 24mm, and considering the kind of magical threshold at this tier is 25-26, especially 26 on enemy battleships, you are lacking a fair bit of overmatch on this ship. The ship itself, however, is well armored. It's surprisingly fast, in fact. Comparing to the Bayern already does some decent speed at 25 knots. This thing does 28 knots and with a flag 29.4. It has the same rudder shift time as the Bayern, but the Bayern actually turns quicker because, well, I assume it's because this ship is so long, so it has a 780-meter turning circle. Still, I haven't really found the handling to be much of an issue on the thing, besides accelerating and stopping, but those are classic battleship issues. It doesn't have the armor of the Bayern. For example, when this Ismail comes around the corner, he could easily punch through and citadel me. I full stop to juke his volley, so he leads too much, and he doesn't end up getting the citadels that I punch back in return on him. But he had more than enough armor penetration to actually citadel me if I had not juked his shot. In fact, the armor on this ship is 300mm, with the citadel being 50mm. It is a waterline citadel, so it is actually quite hard to hit, especially at close ranges. With plunging, you have an easier time, but it's nothing compared to Bayern's incredible turtleback and basically completely underwater citadel. You will basically never citadel a Bayern. Even in a higher tier battleship, you will probably never citadel a Bayern. It's incredibly hard to citadel. This thing, on the other hand, give too much broadside, and it absolutely happens. It does happen, so you have to keep that in mind. In terms of survivability though, this thing actually does have a bit more health than the Bayern, and because it does have an icebreaker, and the difference is the upper nose is 25 whereas Bayern has 26. That difference actually isn't really noticeable at these tiers because battleships kind of overmatch the tip of the nose on other battleships consistently. It's not uncommon at this tier. It's basically standard tier 6 gun power. Well, you don't overmatch them with your guns, of course. The guns, however, do have battlecruiser dispersion. It's 1.6 sigma, not 1.8 like Bayern's, but you do have battlecruiser dispersion, and you have a 27-second reload. So the performance, the accuracy to reload, how often you can use your guns is much better, and the firing angles are actually quite juicy, both pushing forward and kiting away. Also keep in mind that the fourth turret from the back is actually 360, so when you push in you can like switch sides just like you can on the Schlieffen, and it's very much enjoyable. The score is even at this point. Both ships are down 1. They have a cruiser completely alone here. I tell my Huang He to back off. Please don't push in, don't go in. There's no reason for him. There's a Keek doing. The ship doesn't have any torpedoes. He basically can't do anything about me. I can just push up and kill him with main guns and secondaries, and there's nothing I can do. But my Huang He with 5 minutes into the game decide that he absolutely has to rush in, and he has to give flat broadside to him to use his torpedoes, and he gets himself dev struck instantly for absolutely no reason. I of course ask him why. I don't understand. There was absolutely no need to do any of those things, but I mean, Tier 6 ranked is what it is. Here though, I do get to show off the secondaries. I'm not fully built for the secondaries in the sense that I do have manual secondaries, as you can see, it's activating, and I do have the secondary range. However, in upgrade modules, I have built for the guns because the base range on the secondaries simply isn't that good at this tier. You don't get the super range yet on the secondaries, but you can get 6.2 basically with the flag, and then you add the captain on top, so you get I think 7.5 km range. And these things, well, the pen isn't impressive. It's 38mm on the big ones, which is very nice, but the small ones has 15. But ultimately the big ones will be doing the majority of the damage, and they will be starting a fair bit of fires as well, which especially against these other cruisers, well, the consistent accuracy, the constant DPM that you pump out is very effective in taking down enemy cruisers. In fact, you will see me take down more than one cruiser with this secondary. Well, more than this kick doing, that is. So, the Huang He argued that if we win, then it was a good choice. If we win in the end, you're right. Otherwise, or if we win in the end, then he was wrong, which is an interesting assumption, because he threw away his ship, and now we're down a ship, and now we have to win in order to prove him wrong. I don't really understand the logic, but I mean, people tell me that EU server is supposedly better than the Russian server, but playing on the EU server, I see the exact type of boneheaded things that I see on the Russian server. The only difference is I can understand what they're saying, which isn't always a blessing, to put it politely. Going back to the secondaries though, the secondary firing angles are nice, and it's worth building manual secondaries on them. They reload and they rapid fire very quickly. Unlike the Bayern has 350mm dispersion, or 350 meter dispersion on the secondaries. This thing has 215, so 350 versus 215. The improved secondary dispersion is extremely noticeable, and it makes these far more usable. While, well, when you have more health and you're faster, your stealth is actually quite a bit better. The one thing is, the big downside on the ship is the AA. The AA is absolute hot garbage on the Mackensen. You cannot defend against any CVs whatsoever. We're talking some of the worst AA. You have one flak that deals 800 damage, 840. It has no accuracy, it has 4.6 km range. You have no continuous damage. Basically, AA wise, you're a complete joke. The Bayern can defend itself much better. However, in these games without CVs, obviously it doesn't matter quite as much, and that's why I said this is like the optimal condition. Same tier, no CV, no submarine, and so forth. In these conditions, the AA isn't a factor, and you're actually quite a bit tankier than the Bayern, even though I'm not running fire prevention here. The fast reloading, basically Soviet damage gun that you have access to, the better dispersion on the guns, the hydro, all of this means that when you push in and start brawling, this thing just performs much better than the Bayern. I pick up the Mackensen with the devastating strike. Hydro spots the Farragut across the map. I'm trying to get secondary shooting on someone so I can build them up. The Farragut, however, he takes his sweet time coming around the corner. At this point, he actually pushes around. I assume he's trying to torpedo me or something, so I angle in against the New Mexico, and I start slowing down, seeing if I can maybe get some shots in on this Farragut, and we can maybe pick him up, because obviously he's misplaying quite heavily. You can see the overmatch. I turn in to mitigate most of the damage, but the New Mexico gets, I don't know, full pens, or potentially just... Can he actually overmatch? I don't think at 356 he can overmatch. He just does damage on my superstructure. So we're just angling in against him and trying to get secondaries in on his Farragut. I'm hoping to stop. You can see the incredible hydro range here. I'm hoping to stop and kill him, but unshun torpedoes are actually spotted in the water, so I'm forced to accelerate and turn in so they don't div strike me. The torpedo belt is only about 20%, which means that you really don't want to hit torpedoes, because, well, health pool of 52 plus hard-hitting torpedoes isn't exactly a fun experience. Note that I'm already running low on heals, and that's the downside of only having 4 heals on the ship. Even with Superintendent that I am running, you go through them very quickly. At this point I realize I'm not going to be able to pick up the Farragut, so I just push in towards the New Mexico. Now I select the Pensacola as my secondary target, and since I've already built up a lot of accuracy, this Pensacola will actually, well, you can see the secondary hits just racking up on the left. I'm trying to go for a drive-by on the New Mexico, but honestly the gun performance really shows itself here. I've struggled to Citadel most heavily armored battleships in this thing, so I just go for full pens and I just go full speed and turn in, out-turning his guns. His guns really can't keep up. He pulls the trigger kind of in a bit of a panic, trying to keep up with my ship, but you can see he's only really hitting my stern because I am turning faster than his poor guns are. This is another advantage of the Mackensen. The turret traverse is actually really good. It's much better than Bayern's turret traverse, whereas Bayern turns the guns in 51 seconds, this thing turns guns in 30 seconds. So basically in every possible way, this thing is better designed for brawling situations. My secondaries pick up the Pensacola. I still have secondaries left, so as soon as the Anshan shows himself, I select him as a secondary target as well, and my secondaries pick up the Anshan. So I expect him to potentially have torped. I'm also worried about the Farragut rushing me down because I have no health whatsoever, or potentially even having already dropped some torpedoes. I decide that I have to full stop because I don't know if the Anshan dropped torpedoes. I don't know where he dropped them either. If he white-lined them, it's better to just angle away and full stop and hoping I'll be safe. But as luck would have it, he just dropped some random widespread set, and 2 of the widespread torps are catching me on the side, and 1 torpedo is enough to pick me off and kill me off from this game. So the game ends, but it really does show when Mackensen gets to do its thing. Mackensen is so much fun and so very, very powerful. This thing, when there's no submarines or carriers to ruin your fun, fun will be had. That is the fundamental. I found this honestly across the line on this German battlecruiser. I said I really like the Schlieffen, I like the Der Flinger, and I've really enjoyed the Mackensen as well. As long as the fun police isn't present, these ships have oodles of fun in them. I'm sorry, I hope Wargaming doesn't nerf them. They generally don't like when I call German ships fun. They tend to attack them with like the nerf hammer really, really hard. But these ships are a lot of fun. In this game, we had, well, a Kraken, 6 fires, 6 citadels, the fires of course only from the secondaries, Confederate, devastating strike, double strike, 2 secondary kills, Kraken, and high caliber. I don't know if you actually noticed it, but if I had managed to pick up that Farragut, that was a 1 versus 4, and this would also have been a solo warrior and a dreadnought. So this was a potential, like, what, 9 achievement game if I'd managed to pick up the Farragut. So I was a bit salty about that, because 9 achievements and a solo warrior is of course always a really strong statement to give, but widespread torpedoes are famously my nemesis because they always tend to catch me in situations where I don't expect them to catch me, and in this case that turned out to be my demise. In hindsight, I should have maybe just turned fully away and just panic evaded and taken all precautions, but hindsight is always 20/20, and you never make mistakes when you know what's already going to happen. Team score wise, 1448 base XP. My team sadly not performing quite as well. My Huang He, that had a lot of things to say, to argue about in chat about we'll see, scored a not so impressive 441 base XP. I see this a lot, and that is cruisers are feeling the need to rush in. I see it in bronze ranked, I see it in silver ranked, and I see it in gold ranked, and I still to this day will not understand it. The longer a cruiser stays alive, the more powerful it is. Good example is the enemy Pensacola, who just hid behind islands and stayed alive as long as possible. He topped the scoreboard on the enemy team because, well, he fulfilled the basic role that a cruiser has, and that is just farming damage without taking damage. So I will not really understand this aggression that I see a lot, but it seems incredibly common for some reason. Detailed report wise though, we have, well, the main gun performance, 110 shells, 49 hits. That is very, very good accuracy. To be fair, there was a fair bit of brawling going on here as well, but that is still some really, really good accuracy. Secondaries, 178 hits, 24,000 damage. Not too much luck on the fires, but that's mostly because I really didn't get to use secondaries much against battleships. They are very good against battleships as well, because well, big chunky targets, and you start a lot of fires, and the fires really tick up really quickly, but in this case the New Mexico died very quickly after getting the fires on him, so not a lot of consistent damage there. 1.6 million potential in an 11-minute ranked game, so I'd say we did our role quite well. Unfortunately, the party came to an end with the torpedo. I'll show you guys my recommended build. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be running this build on basically all the German battle cruisers, but highly recommend. So far, highly recommended, provided there wouldn't be submarines. That's really it. Like, I really, really enjoy these ships because I love brawling, I love secondary ships, I love ships that have a lot of damage potential when you close the distance, and these things absolutely have it. The problem is there are just so many things in the game that punish you when you try to close the distance right now. However, perhaps Wargaming will finally forcibly remove their head from their asses, and submarines will be removed to randoms, and in that case these ships are going to be absolute buckets of fun. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build. Right, starting off, equipment-wise, I've actually preferred... Whoa, UI, calm down. Well, obviously there's not a whole lot to upgrade. Equipment-wise, I prefer turret survival, standard tankiness, and instead of secondary range, I just go for better dispersion on the main guns. Secondary range is an option, but honestly I feel like so much of your value comes from your good firing angles, the 360-degree back turret, and well, the majority of your damage seems to just come from these guns. So building full secondary, while fun, doesn't seem to be quite as good as more of a hybrid build where you kind of invest into both the guns and the secondaries. Additional tankiness, of course. Gunter Lutyens, if you have him, he is god tier. Preventive maintenance to keep your turrets alive. They do seem to like breaking. Better turret reverse, because once again, well, you probably saw me switch sides quite often, and of course if you have Gunter, it is improved. Note that because turret reverse is so good, you can probably go priority target as well. AR into improved healing. After this, you have some options. Those, I would say, those are the first 10 points. After this, you can go concealment expert like I do, or you can build secondary range and get your secondaries significantly buffed as well. They do provide some value, as you saw. They picked up the DD, they picked up the Pensacola while I was brawling the battleship. In situations where you get to brawl, this can provide a lot of value. Fire prevention, I like it generally on battleships, but honestly on these ships you do want to use your secondaries whenever you can, especially since, well, the pen of 15 isn't that impressive, but these one penning 38mm kind of pen everything at tier 6. Like, there's not a whole lot that can really shatter this HE, and the fire chance seems quite good as well, so it does end up providing a fair bit of extra DPM. So this is generally the build that I've settled on for at least the tier 6. We'll see if it changes as I move on to the higher tiers. Fire prevention might be, not having fire prevention might be a bit iffy, but the fast damage con tends to make up for this weakness somewhat effectively. Flag-wise, of course, secondary flag, fires, speed and healing and reduction in fire. Pretty standard, and then I've added in flooding recovery and detonation for the sake of ranked, otherwise not that important. Armor layout, as you can see, it does have an icebreaker down here, 30mm and 120. At this tier, of course, 30mm is more than enough. There's nothing really that can overmatch it, but the upper nose is 25, so very easily overmatchable. You don't have a turtleback on the ship, so you need to keep that in mind when you give a lot of broadside. Your citadel is just, well, it's kind of exposed. I wouldn't say very exposed because it's basically a waterline citadel. It hovers right at the waterline. At range you get citadeled easier, but even at close ranges you can just be punched through and citadeled. It is a form of spaced armor with 300mm on the outside and then a belt of 50 here and 60 underneath the turrets. So the armor is pretty good. But I do end up eating I have found myself eating the occasional citadel in the ship. So far though, Mackensen, just like the Derflinger, has actually been a really good experience. I've been enjoying playing these ships. Submarines and CVs, of course, make your game extremely frustrating because your AA is a joke, and submarines in general are just really, really stupid if the player is even semi-competent. Luckily, the vast majority of submarine players are not semi-competent, so that tends to work in your favor. Anyway, as always, thank you for watching. If you do like the content, please do subscribe. I will talk to you guys next time.